call this meeting to order. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And we are live streaming, so we have to keep on time. We have a good presentation tonight with Mr. Ryan Hoffman going to give us the history of Hoffman Ford, which I'm excited to hear. They've been a major player in our area, and one of the first businesses as we saw the huge transition from an agricultural community going into more of a suburban area, being attached more to like Harrisburg. So I remember playing in those fields and seeing those fields as a kid. But to start, let us have the pledge to the flag. Bob, would you lead that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Now, before we have the opportunity to listen to Ryan, I just wanted to say a few things. First off, I sit on the board, the Lower Paxton Community Foundation, and they're the ones that are the help us raise funds because we're considered a government under the government umbrella here, and we can't use any taxpayer dollars. So it's they're a good organization, and the little handout that I handed out shows two events that are real big for that foundation, and one we're going to be participating in, which would be the July 2nd, which is the Independent Weekend, and they have a very nice set of events that are going to be going on. A lot of people will be vendors and food trucks, etc. And I plan on us having a table. And if I'm not mistaken, Bill will not be able to be there, but we'll have some of your information on your 250th. So I look forward to that. I wanted to hand that out. And then on the back of that card is the Chris Kringle Mart. I can never say it. There you go, Chris Kindle Mart. And that is, see, that's why I need margaritas. So that's a very nice event, and it happens in Linglestown, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I have to, with Hoffman Ford being representative here, they're very supportive of that event. I remember riding around in one of the golf carts that you helped provide. So thank you on that. And since the cat is out of the hat, so to speak, I would like to make an announcement that our very own Denise Daimler will be receiving one of the first of the awards that it's the there you go, the Polly Murphy Spiritism of Volunteerism. And with Denise, with all of her volunteer work, she'll be one of the first recipients that'll be getting that. So congratulations.
All right, Denise.
And with that, Brian, if you're ready, I would like to turn it over.
There we go. There you are. Perfect. How's everybody tonight? Good, good. So again, I obviously was invited by Mr. Goss, so thank you. Again, glad to share the history of Hoffman Ford with you guys. So this year is our 70th year anniversary, so that's kind of perfect timing as well. So next slide. Yep.
Oh, okay, it's on. You're good. It's on. You have to talk into it.
Yep. So, kind of how it all began. So, that's my grandfather, Earl B. Hoffman Sr. In the 1940s, he worked at the Bethlehem Steel Company. He was a welder and a fabricator at Bethlehem Steel. So, basically worked in the mill, or in the steel mill all day. But he really enjoyed working on cars. So, in his spare time, he always worked with his hands. He was a hands-on guy, 1,000%, and had a love for vehicles. And he also enjoyed playing basketball and refereeing basketball. So again, I don't know how anybody in here knows, but he was a PIAA ref for years in the local community, even before getting into being a dealer, later becoming the mayor of Highspire, later becoming Dauphin County Commissioner. So again, just a little bit of background before we even start into this. Again, he had a full gamut of things that he did in his lifetime. Next slide. So this is the start. So again, with his love of vehicles and his skilled labor for working on vehicles, he decided that he needed a place to work on his own vehicles. And he loved racing. So again, over on the desks over there, you'll see a couple of his race cars that he kind of, old dirt track, 33, 34s in those time periods. So in the early 40s, wanting a place to do his work himself as a hobby outside of working at the Bethlehem Steel, he decided to purchase a small plot of land from his father, my great-grandfather, and he had a little farmette that he basically had at the time. So he basically purchased a corner, which was a little onion patch at the time, in the back corner of my great-grandfather's property. And he built what my grandfather always referred to as his hobby shop, which, as you can see there, up on the top, you can see it says Hoffman's Garage. Up there at the very top, it was a one-bay garage on a 50 by 100-foot onion patch. And I think from what I was always told from my father, the corner here, the onion patch was still on the other side of the fence. Part of it. Next slide. So again, the start, his hobby shop that he really enjoyed basically doing after work, he kind of turned it into working on other people's cars. And the word got out that he was able to do some of the light maintenance. Again, he was a welder and fabricator, so he actually started working on people's cars. So eventually his hobby shop list of clients began to grow so much that a friend of his started working with him. And they kind of did this on the side, again, at nights and weekends. So they basically decided that, hey, it was time that they're going to grow, and they put up the sign that was in that last photo. That was Hoffman's Garage. Again, his close friend eventually told him, like, hey, this is growing so big, why don't you just get into the car industry? Next slide. His advice was well given. So again, Earl took his friend's advice, and he landed a Kaiser Frazer automobile franchise in 1947. Again, you can see that's the Kaiser Frazer vehicles in its time. Not long after, again, the company only was founded, the Kaiser Frazer franchise was only founded in 1945. So 2 years later is when my grandfather got the franchise in 1947. Again, we were one of the first early on dealers for Kaiser Frazer at the time. So again, my aunt actually still has this, which was his original sign that hung outside the building, which you'll see here in a couple of minutes, a couple of the photos about what the building looked like at the time. Next slide. So again, in order to him to properly now acquire the Kaiser Frazer franchise, coming from his little 50 by 100-foot one-bay garage, he obviously had to grow. So he actually took all his money that he was making on the side from all the people that were doing the work, and he ended up purchasing what at the time was the local Esso fuel station on 2nd Street in Highspire. If you go there now, it is Rita's Italian Ice. So again, he took the existing gas station and he added the left-hand side, which was a one-car showroom. So again, he was a very hands-on person. He built it all himself for the most part with a couple of friends and family members. But he took the existing gas station, which is the square part, and then added that little box kind of looking thing on the side, which is the showroom, which would fit one car. Next slide. So again, in his first year of business, with only 3 employees at his new location that he had purchased, His team outsold the nearby Ford store, which was J.A. Plaster and Son, and the local Chevy store, which was Graham Page Chevy, both in Steelton or Hoyspire. Ford Motor Company obviously took notice to this, and they were keeping a close eye on my grandfather and his two-man team. In 1951, Ford Motor Company actually ended up trying to attempt to terminate their franchise agreement with J.A. Plaster and Son. And you can actually still go online today and find the legal case and the court docs from that. It was about a 2-year legal case that J.A. Plaster took against Ford Motor Company for basically, why are we being put out of business? And it was talking about Ford parts, Ford sales. It talks about the whole thing. It's like an 18-page document that's out there. So again, that was actually a picture of the Chevy store that was in Hoyspire at the time. So next slide. So again, obviously the success was acknowledged, and Ford definitely knew that this was something to keep an eye on, which, like I said earlier, they did. So in 1953, while still being a Kaiser Frazer dealer, he was in the process of actually building a new Kaiser Frazer dealership down the street from the existing building that they were in for the Kaiser Frazer franchise. He had bought a 7-acre lot on 2nd Street, just down a couple blocks from where this dealership originally was located. And we're not certain if it was May or June of 1953 when he was actually physically outside building the building at the new location, laying block. And the story has it that I've been told since I was a little kid was he was up on the scaffolding. As he was up on the scaffolding, the receptionist at the Kaiser Frazer franchise had a visitor show up. That visitor was Lee Iacocca, who at the time happened to have just been the local Ford zone rep. So he was low man on the totem pole for the Philadelphia region at the time. And he asked if Mr. Hoffman was available, and she said, unfortunately, he's down the street building his new facility. So he got in his car and drove down to the facility, gets up, walks up to my grandfather and yells up, supposedly, as I've been told, "Are you Mr. Hoffman?" And he says, "Yes, who are you?" He says, "I'm a guy that has an opportunity for you." So at the time, he asked if my grandfather would come down off the scaffolding. My grandfather responded, "Not until the mortar's done and I'm done laying my brick." So supposedly, the way the story has it again, that I've been told since I was a little kid, is that Lee Iacocca crawled the scaffolding, got up on the scaffolding with my grandfather, laid a couple bricks with him, and they talked man to man and agreed upon that he was getting a Ford franchise. So again, they were lifetime friends then for years and years. Henry Ford II also was a good friend of my grandfather's. But Lee Iacocca was the official person who gave my grandfather the Ford franchise for Steelton Hoyspire. And again, obviously, if everybody knows who Lee Iacocca is, he obviously went on to do much larger things and grew up through the totem pole. Next slide. So again, as the building that was currently being built for the Kaiser Frazer franchise, now they kind of had to change gears. Obviously, it was now going to be a Ford dealership and no longer a Kaiser Frazer franchise. So my grandfather had purchased a 7-acre lot, which was right on 2nd Street in Hoyspire. The airport runway was in the backyard, so you could basically see it right through the fence. They were building a 62,000 square foot dealership with a service and parts center at the time. Again, while he had a few employees that were physically working and building that dealership, obviously they still had to figure out, okay, hey, when's the switch going to happen between Kaiser Frazer and Ford? So they officially changed it over to a Ford dealership and continued operating the Ford dealership now out of the existing Kaiser Frazer dealership. So again, in the first year of sales, they sold 150 vehicles out of the one vehicle showroom. So again, kind of put them on the map a little bit. And again, I think according to my dad, it was about 9 employees when they officially transitioned from the old original Kaiser Frazer dealership over into the new modern dealership that they had just built down the street. So again, that's a picture of my grandfather. My great-grandfather is on the left, and that's my dad stuck behind the thing as they're surveying for the new property. Next slide. So this is what ultimately became Hoffman Fordland, which was the new building that he had built on 427 2nd Street in Hoyspire. Again, obviously, this wasn't exactly at the time. This is the only overarching photo that we have of the whole facility. And this was at the very beginning, because here at the front was the showroom. In later years, he actually took this whole section back here and built a standalone service and parts center. The standalone service and parts center is still standing today. The dealership was tore down probably in the early 2000s, and it is now the Dollar General, I think it is. That's sitting there. I think it's the Dollar General. It is. So when the Dollar General was being built, obviously my dad and my grandfather had since passed away, but my dad wanted to go down one last time before they tore down the old showroom. They actually kept the back wall, because there's an alley that ran between the back of the building and the new building that my grandfather had built for the service and parts center. And the alley, they kept the wall that was in the alley, which is still part of the Dollar General today. So again, the property went from basically this house, and then it went over further this way. And again, that you can see the mountains in the back on the other side of the river, and the tree line in the back is basically the Harrisburg Airport runway. Yep, yeah, the fence runs almost right there. So again, that was the existing dealership when he had built it in 1954-ish. Next slide. Unfortunately, they had success up until 1972. Hurricane Agnes came through and basically washed all the inventory out. Again, right there next to the airport and the river, everything came up through and flooded it. There was a remodel that was done in between. So again, you can see from 1972 to 1975, they kind of revamped a little bit. But again, 1975 came around and they got flooded again. There are photos on the tables that are the interior and the reconstruction from when it flooded in 72 and from 75. So there's a bunch of different photos over there that you guys can see. Desks were floating. I forget, I think it was 1975. My dad tells the story. There was an upstairs in the building where the yellow section is, and he tells the story that for some reason he decided that he was going to sleep at the dealership the night that it was flooding. And he said he woke up to hearing splashing sounds. And he said to this day he still doesn't remember why he did it, but he put a John boat in the showroom, just in case. So supposedly he heard some splashing. Somebody had broke in overnight and was trying to steal the John boat, but the water had already risen. So he came down the stairs and he said he hit the whole water, and him and this guy fought over the John boat. He said he still doesn't know who the person was at this point. They ended up and he said it was the morning at this point when he was woken up. And this was when my grandfather was mayor of Highspire. So apparently the amphibious army vehicles from like the, drawing a blank on it, the Guard came through, and supposedly where the dealership sat, it was at the low point in town. And he could see the amphibious vehicle coming in, and they hit the water and sent a wave up over the front, took out all the glass in the showroom. And my dad said he hit the ground, went under the water, and all the showroom windows shattered, and out went the John boat, out went the desks, out went everything. Again, my grandfather was mayor. My dad said, he makes the joke that my grandfather then said to him, "Boy, go tie that amphibious vehicle to the telephone pole. They're paying for our windows." So he ended up doing what my grandfather said. He tied it to the pole. So next slide. So again, after 2 floods, obviously Ford, and losing almost $2.5 million of inventory each time, Ford came to him and said, "Hey, I think it's time to move to higher grounds." Higher grounds moved out to Route 22 in Colonial Park. So again, that's obviously one that is on the historical website, but basically where that's in 22 up there at the top, and that's basically where Hoffman Ford now is. So again, they purchased, my grandfather, I remember him even as a little kid telling the story that everybody said to him, like, "You're nuts going out there, there's nothing there. It's farm fields." Somehow he knew. Again, obviously Lower Paxton grew drastically then after that. So that was the new dealership that was built. Again, in 1977, they began construction. They ended up selling the location in Highspire and moved out officially into the building in 1978. Next slide. These are just some pictures of the dealership at the grand opening. So again, this was the interior of the showroom in 1978. So again, you can look at those. Again, if it was color, as a kid, I can remember all the sales cubicles are mustard yellow. The carpet was burnt orange. Next slide. So that was the service counter. So again, basically the service counter, as you'll see in future photos, has grown drastically. At that point, there were 2 guys that worked the counter. That was it. Next slide. That's inside our shop. So again, the shop existing, it was just a straight building. It went straight back with a little overhang on the side that was a carport, for less terminology. All the garage doors were in the back of the building. At that point, same way to the left, which you can't see, there's a photo, I believe, over there. He put underground pits that the cars actually drove over top of. Again, they kind of brought those back in some cases. Where the picture is currently being taken from is what we called the service tower, or the dispatcher. That person was responsible for dispatching the work to the technicians. Next slide. There you go. That was the customer lounge. Again, wood paneling, wallpaper with all the Model A's and T's and everything up there. It's nice and comfy. We actually still have this piece of furniture in storage with its orange leather. Next slide. Again, obviously the whole premise of Hoffman Ford really started with my grandfather being in the body shop business and being a fabricator and welder. So he was always working on cars. So obviously we built the second half of the dealership in 78 was the collision center. We didn't have that in Highspire. So it was just parts and service in Highspire. So when they moved out here, they built a whole brand new collision center. Next slide. Again, continued success, obviously, throughout the years from the time they moved out to 1978 till basically throughout the whole growth of Hoffman Ford. Again, that's me here being held by my grandfather. That's my dad, and that's my brother Todd. So, again, it was Earl Jr. is my dad, and Earl Sr. is my grandfather. So, they ran the dealership. My dad, he actually got into the business in the mid-'60s. When he graduated from college. Again, if you guys aren't familiar, my dad played basketball at Penn State. He was a All-American at Penn State. He got drafted by the New York Knicks. He went to the New York Knicks summers camp when he graduated. That in those days, again, he tells the story that he basically made no money. It was still the men's basketball league. It wasn't even the national basketball. It was just the men's basketball league. So he decided, again, he graduated with an accounting degree. So he came back and started helping my grandfather in the business. That's when my grandfather went into politics. So that's when he became mayor and went on to become Dauphin County Commissioner and some other positions that he held, supervisor in West Hanover Township for many years. So again, as we continued to grow throughout the years, across the main Route 22 from where our dealership is, there was the old Texaco gas station. We ended up buying that in the early 90s. Again, we changed it to Hoffman Ford. You can see up there at the very top. While we functioned out of it for about a year, maybe year and a half, we ended up building a new dealership for our pre-owned center on the same property just right behind it. So they still were able to work in the front little gas station section while they were building the new pre-owned building in the back. And again, there's a whole bunch of photos over there that show what the property used to look like prior to it being after the Texaco, but while it was Hoffman Ford. Because there actually was a house behind where the current pre-owned building is right now. There actually was a ranch house back there that we ended up having to take down to build where we needed to. Next slide. So again, as time kind of went on, we continued to remodel the dealership. So again, you can see from the differences from the original photo. They put a front entrance on the front in the early 2000s, revamped all the interior. We got rid of the orange and the yellow, went to more modern colors of gray and blue, and no carpet, things like that. So again, that was our parts department there in the middle. We ended up in the same time in the early 2000s we ended up putting a body shop office that was a customer-facing office, which we did not have prior to that. And then same way, the service counter in the photo I just showed you, we went from having just a 2-section one, and again, if you went back, the cashier window is still in the same place. So we ended up adding 3 there, and then actually 2 more, so we ended up with 5 in 2000s. Next slide. So again, time continues on. Again, there's much success, obviously, as we continue to grow. So in early 2011, we added an additional addition into the back of the building. And again, the first addition actually also happened in the early to mid 90s. Like I said in the last photo that was showing all the garage doors in the back, we ended up taking some of those garage doors off and added a section for the body shop and the service center. So in 2011, we had to add again. So you can see some of the construction that we did. This was to add all of our commercial capabilities. So again, we can do heavy duty truck lifts, we can do RVs. So we get all the RVs from Camping World and Myers. They come to us and we can lift them. Our technician, Bobby O and Scott Korth, they're taller guys, so they don't have to work on their knees. They can actually put the vehicles completely up in the air and stand underneath them without having to go underneath and crawl around on his hands and knees. We added an additional customer lounge to our body shop. You can see the photos there. We added a car wash. And basically, again, we revamped the whole inside of the shop at that point. Did a couple little odds and ends to some of the parts counter area in 2011. Next slide. In 2012, we purchased the property that was adjacent to us, kind of on the same side of the street, but it was Danny's Tires and Towing. So again, you can see it used to have the culvert that ran down through along Route 22. So we ended up cleaning that up, got township's approval, state's approval. We ended up making it look real nice, and that's what it looks like today. Tore down the existing building that was there, which was again kind of a little 2-3 bay garage. And we ended up having all of our used cars now on this side of the street in 2012. Next slide. So again, as we continue to grow, we outgrew our existing building. So my brother and I at this point, we made the decision that we wanted to ultra modernize the dealership and be compliant really with Ford Motor Company. So again, the Ford Motor Company wanted us to have the same look and feel that if you looked at a McDonald's, every McDonald's looks the same. They wanted every Ford dealership to look the same across the country so that everybody recognized the brand from the street. We were able to kind of design it the way we wanted to on the interior a little bit, but a lot of the stuff was dictated to us by Ford. Again, color schemes, paints, that type of thing, so it always looks like a Ford dealership. So again, that was our kind of remodel of the existing showroom. Again, we went into that building at the beginning of 2020. Obviously, we all know what happened in March of 2020, COVID hit. So we were in the building for about 3 months before COVID hit. And then we were shut down, just as everybody else was.
Is that orange? I see it again. Maybe that white.
Nope, those are like light oak. Yeah, yes. Yep, it's all light. We either had a choice of dark mahogany wood, which was more of a Lincoln brand color, or a light oak, which is what Ford really opted and wanted us to go for. Yep, and then again, we revamped the whole inside of the shop. We painted it, sealed the floors again. So, and again, right now we have between both bays on service and collision, we have almost 58 bays to be able to service vehicles in. We have 3 downdraft paint booths, so we were able to paint. Our parts department, same way, is growing. In the original, I think there's a photo over there of the original parts department. My grandfather, in probably the early 90s, added a second floor inside the existing parts department. So he put like a mezzanine type structure over top of the existing cabinets, and so we now have a 2-floor parts department. We originally, when we were designing the building, we actually wanted to go up so that we didn't increase our footprint and lose parking. Again, ironically, where our building is sitting, the lower portion of the property, which you can see in the photo that's up here on the desk, is also in the 100-year floodplain. just like we were in the 100-year floodplain in Highspire. No. The lower parking lot got a little wet the one time, right there where it dips, where it goes across with on 22. Yep. But again, because of increasing the footprint, we ended up having to go out instead of up, just to be compliant with some of the floodplain and water runoff situations that were to have occurred. Next slide. So again, you can kind of see, you can see the difference here in some of the photos. So you can see where the addition took effect in the back in the early, like 2011. So while we were under construction, we were working out of a triple wide trailer for service and a double wide trailer for sales. Everything from this part here forward is new. And again, the existing dealership only used to be basically following this wall and this wall. So we increased the footprint that way and a lot increased that way. And this is where the 100-year floodplain comes down through. It goes back to the lake. So we ended up having to, and again, to be compliant with everything, there's an underground retention pond that's right here in this parking lot, which is why we couldn't do it. What we wanted to do was just going up. In 2000, which again, I don't have on a slide here, but in 2015 or 16, we purchased these properties up here. So there used to be a house here. We tore that house down and put our employee parking. So because we lost the footprint for parking here, our employees used to park down here. So we had to find a place to put them so that our customers could still have parking. So we tore that house down and created a employee parking lot up where that house was.
I'm surprised with all the rules and regs that you got away with putting a parking lot over a retention.
There's actually, no, we had to build it. It's a truly underground or man-made retention pond. Yep, there's two of them actually on the property.
Isn't there back that way in that development, isn't there is it a creek or something?
Yeah, there's a lake, Lakeside Marina.
Exactly.
It's right there.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. So all the water comes basically from this side of Route 22, goes under our property, goes underneath that, goes back to the lake.
Wow.
So, but yeah, there's actually two underground retention ponds that we were required to put in. There's a big one, it's probably about the full width of here underneath the front, that it drains slowly. It's like I forget what it's called exactly. It's like a French drain, kind of like a French drain, I think, where the water sits in it and then it slowly drains out instead of a quick rush. So we ended up having to put those in. But that's the existing footprint of the dealership as currently. Our plan, though, eventually is to take the house that's up here, and because, again, we've already outgrown our new facility from 2020, we need to build a standalone collision center, which will end up being up on the top. Again, you can get to where Members First is on the downside. It would sit right between where we currently are and where Members First is, behind where the current car wash is being built. So that's kind of our long-term plan, probably again another 2-3 years. Hopefully we can get that started. But that's our existing footprint of where we're at right now. Again, say next slide, see some. So again, obviously this year is our 70th. So again, my brother and I were our third generation. Our father obviously still comes in and keeps us in line, at least one time a week. But again, our plan is to keep it here for the next 70 years. Again, we have no plans of going anywhere out of this township. Township's great to us. So again, we're very fortunate where we're at, and kind of the partnership that we've created with everybody here at Lower Paxton. So again, that's my dad and my mother, their dog, my brother and myself a couple years ago, but that's about it.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Before I open it up for questions, one thing that I would like to mention is back in another life when I ran the Central Dauphin tax office, your grandfather was one of my board members.
Okay.
And I would have loved to have known the history that you taught me tonight so that I could have had a one-on-one conversation with him.
Yes.
That,
It's
kind
crazy
of,
to hear some of the stories.
it
that
really
they
is.
have. I was talking to Bill earlier, so I'll tell a little quick story. Bill gets a kick out of it too. Bill's a longtime customer, so again, thank you guys.
My husband's been a long,
Oh,
quite a few year customer of yours, Jeff, if you know him.
okay.
Eric
Yep.
Kessler.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yep.
He has nothing but good to say.
Oh.
Okay.
I went to school with Steve, so.
I'll let you say that.
But so when they were in Highspire, again, my grandfather was very hands-on, and there was never a project that he didn't want to take on, ever.
That's cool.
Yes, it is.
And again, as he got older, there were things that he did that he probably shouldn't have done. But even when he was in Highspire and wasn't on the older spectrum per se, he decided that he was going to get the bright idea to buy a cement truck. The cement truck that he had purchased had hardened cement in the barrel already. So his goal was, during my downtime, I'm going to take the cement truck and I will chisel the cement out and we will sell a cement truck. Apparently, the cement truck sat and sat and sat, and a couple years went by and nobody was doing anything, and he never got around to chiseling the cement truck out. So the story has it is, if anybody were to ever dig where the existing service center is, they may happen to find a cement truck. Because it is currently buried underneath the slab of cement in Highspire.
That's not his fault, that's the foot's.
Correct. But yes, there's many stories. Oh yeah, tons of stories. Yep.
Are there any questions?
Not a question, I'd just like to comment. I didn't know your father, but I knew your grandfather, and
Okay.
obviously I know you. And I want to tell you, Hoffman Ford is very accommodating. I happen to like Mustangs, and the 50th anniversary came out in 2015, and someone had alerted me that the Mustang Club of American members, someone bought at 2015 at another dealership, and they were letting him have a party. And I said to Hoffman Ford, I'll buy my 2015 Mustang if I can have a party in your showroom. And they thought that was a no-brainer.
Yep.
And they know me when I walk in there because he's the guy that had a party. And they set up the whole showroom, I can show you pictures, with my 2015 50th anniversary Mustang, filled the showroom with Mustangs, balloons, etc., etc. And he
Yep.
knows I just bought one.
Yep. Just a
my
couple
third
months ago.
Mustang, just last year, which was a difficult time when we couldn't get.
Yes, couldn't find the vehicles.
So I love Hoffman Ford.
Thank you.
That was a paid political.
Hey,
Hoffman's always taken care of me. I can't say, very accommodating. It's kind of fun to go in, because they know you.
Nope.
But the one thing, when you're moving up on the hill with the body work, I heard what somebody had told me, with all the aluminum now, it's a whole other deal. I don't know if
It
you
is.
elaborate on
Yep.
that.
So right now, again, for the collision side of things, so our view, or my personal view, on how the car industry is going to change here over the next couple of years is, obviously right now they're pushing for electric. In the next couple of months, we actually have to put in 4 fast chargers on our property that will be available for paid customers to come in, and they can basically charge just like you do in downtown Harrisburg. But that's a requirement that Ford's putting on us as dealers, so that as they continue to put out models of electric vehicles, that the infrastructure exists. A couple states, unfortunately, have already passed that Ford can't require this of dealers. Pennsylvania is not one of them yet. I think I just saw it was Indiana and Wisconsin were the 2 that just passed this week, that stated that Ford Motor Company cannot dictate to us as a Ford dealer that you have to put in a charger, because we're already selling the vehicles. So they can't put an extra step on something and say, if you want to sell the vehicles, you have to put a charger in. That's part of the franchise agreement. So, but with the body part of this, as EVs, obviously, as we all know, electric vehicles really don't need maintenance other than brakes and tires. So as that kind of morphs through, unfortunately, in the world, until every car is autonomous and drives themselves, people are going to wreck, unfortunately, and have accidents, and the deers will still run out in front of everybody. But in regards to how the collision center is going to work, is you actually have to be certified as a collision center, and most collision centers right now are closing. There's a lot of closures that are happening because the insurance companies, again, are similar to the manufacturers in that regard, that they dictate to us as the dealer or the body shop company what they're going to pay, how they're going to pay, how the repair process has to go, and things like that. However, with some of this aluminum stuff, because again, we have to have certain tools, because again, you can't mix steel and aluminum or it creates thermite. Thermite obviously is an explosion that happens, so you have to separate all these, so you have to have designated bays, which I kind of always joked as growing up that these things look kind of like an Ebola chamber. It's a big plastic thing that you go in, you drive the car into, and you work on the car in this little bubble. But in regards to looking at it for the future, again, a lot of the stuff for body shops, like again, you can't work on a Tesla vehicle currently if you're not Tesla certified. So it's very similar. You can't work on an aluminum vehicle if you're not certified. So again, these are some of the mandates that are coming down from the government, really. But looking at it is, one, we're going to obviously have to be certified, and we already are, for EVs to do any type of body work on electric vehicles. Again, like fire companies all have to be certified on and understand the knowledge of, hey, don't cut that bright yellow or bright orange cord when you're in an accident, because that's all electricity that's running in that electric vehicle. So again, there's a lot of HAC does a lot of training and stuff on that, but our guys go through immense training from Ford specifically. But again, as these body shops continue to close time after time, unfortunately, because the mandates are just becoming almost too much for a small mom and pop type business to stay in business. The body shop industry is going to continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller as multiple rooftops to, hey, you have to go to the one larger place because it's the only place that's certified, that can buy the tools, buy the equipment, has the training, has the knowledge, things like that. So hopefully that answers your bill. It is. It is. And again, it's all dictated by the insurance companies. That's the tough part.
Okay. Isn't there in the EVs, and I could be wrong, isn't there some kind of a element or something in there that they have to be careful with because it can explode?
It can.
Or catch on fire, causes fires or something?
It can. So again, unfortunately, there's so many different elements on an EV battery.
My sister-in-law in Israel, they just got an EV.
Okay.
Which we had the privilege of riding in the last time we were over there. They're nice, but quite frankly, would I own one? No.
Yeah, and the biggest thing right now, I think, with the EVs is I kind of even tell some of our team members that are kind of newer to the auto industry, in my opinion, I think
Right.
EVs are going to be kind of like a plasma television, I hope. Plasma televisions came out, and you had to pay the moon for them. The technology then it basically advanced so much that you can now buy an LED for half, probably like a quarter of what you used to pay for a plasma. So I think eventually it's going to get to that point, but who's to say there isn't going to be something else that doesn't come along in the meantime?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do you think that EVs are the way of the future for drivers, or do you think that there will be a mix of EVs and what most people are currently driving?
I think it's going to be a mix. I don't think the infrastructure for the electric vehicles isn't here yet, especially here in Pennsylvania, unless you go to Philadelphia or to Pittsburgh. And I think that's where, until the range of those batteries can continue to grow, everybody has what they call range anxiety.
It's the batteries.
Yep.
That's the problem.
So range anxiety is basically how far can I go on this tank of charge? So as those charge times and stuff continue to decrease, and I think it's Pittsburgh University and I think it was Drexel, if I read right, they're testing cold charging batteries. Because again, everybody knows that if you charge a cell phone too much, the battery gets hot, and what's it do? It swells. So again, if you cold charge a battery, they're trying to figure out how to cold charge these because again, unfortunately, the charge life and the life of the battery in general is what everybody's kind of concerned about. And then what it's going to cause to the environment when you have to dispose of these batteries. So
Well,
that's
I'm
gonna be the
going to
biggest
go
thing.
back a little bit in history here real quick. Back when your grandfather ran the Kaiser dealership, he sold, were they Kaiser cars that he sold, or were they, okay.
Yep.
Do you know whether or not, are there any of those vehicles at the Auto Museum?
I think there's a Henry J at the Auto Museum.
Okay,
So that's what it was. Yep, in Hershey.
nice.
So it's the Henry J was their like famous vehicle that they ended up like Kaiser Frazer created. I think that was only, if I remember right, there's only like 5 models that they ever created,
Okay,
and they ended up going. I won't call it under, but I think they kind of dissipated the Kaiser Frazer franchise in 1953, and it became another company that bought them out or something.
yeah, because I never heard of them, so I was doing a little research while
Yep.
I was listening to you, and I saw they were getting involved with like Willie's Jeep and
Yep.
all that.
Yep,
I
think
found
it
that
was
interesting.
Their
So
partnership somehow with Jeep, I think it was.
yeah,
After they kind of went away from the true Kaiser Frazer franchise.
yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
And again, obviously, you probably looked in there. The Kaiser Frazer franchise evolved from the war and everything
Yes,
that it talked
yes,
about.
yes, I
So-
saw that.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I just think on the electric, you might know, there's gonna be some limiting factors, such as with fire suppression in an accident, the regular tank, or you know all this, they only hold X amount of water in case more, so then I'm thinking, well, what if they use foam, then who's gonna pay for the foam truck, and there's bad things in the foam.
Yep.
And then an article I was reading I was looking at the fire suppression, now you have parking garages, and the emitters can't put out enough water, and it's the weight which might have led to that one collapse. I don't know.
Oh.
I think, they might limit themselves, but then who pays for all this? Will it be the taxpayer as a whole?
No, I just watched a video the other night. It was the gentleman who's pushing the electric tractor trailer. I guess it was either in front of Congress or representatives. And the video, basically, one of the representatives or congressmen asked him, like, again, like a normal tractor for a tractor and trailer, I think he said costs $180,000 to buy just the tractor. This new one that's electric, he's saying would cost close to $800,000 just to be able to have the range capacity to go anywhere. And that was the comment from the either the representative or congressman. And he said, who pays for that?
What do you do in foul weather in traffic? You can
Yep.
idle there forever, it's freezing out, how do you stay warm?
Nope. And the
Military vehicles, that's ridiculous that they were, they're
Nope.
not gonna charge up my Jeep here.
Yep. And I agree with whoever the representative or congressperson was that made the comment back to this gentleman. And he said, so think about it. He says, if you have to buy that $800,000 tractor to tow goods across the country, the company that has to ship those goods, their rates just went up. So if their rates go up, they pass it down to the consumer. It's unfortunately it'll be a trickle down effect. So
So do we have any other questions about the history? We'll
So again, take a look at those. Again, this is a grand opening photo frame of 1978 up here. That's the original aerial photo from 1978 when they moved out there. So again, from the one here that you can kind of see the buildings in the background, there's no buildings in the background. Triple Crown buildings weren't built yet. They actually, again, kind of the history of that was all originally Hoffman Ford property when they first bought it. In the oil crisis in the 80s, they ended up having to sell that to basically stay afloat. So they sold it off to Triple Crown.
wow.
So
You had all the land you needed.
we did. We had all the land we needed, and now we just have to buy it back slowly, years over years. Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Yep. So, and then again, over on those desks over there, there's photos, like I said, of the old pre-owned building, which is across from Route 22, or across from the main dealership on Route 22, and what that looked like before we cleaned out the culvert and everything that was over there. There's some photos of my grandfather racing, the original Patriot News ad for the grand opening in 1978. Some other Patriot News ads years over years. Again, we had a 25th anniversary, 50th anniversary. So our next big milestone with Ford will be 75th year anniversary when they actually come in and they'll present us with a full plaque and award and everything like they did in 25th and 50th anniversaries. In between there also, again, a quick thing is my dad also did go out in the mid 70s and we had Hoffman Chevrolet as well.
Oh, wow.
So Hoffman Chevrolet existed in Middletown on Vine Street. It's now the, I forget what the limo company is. It's called. It's right across the street from like where they just built the rudders and everything on Vine
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
There's a limo company that sits up on the hill. It used to be D&H or DHL was in part of it, and then the limo company was in the other side.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's
Yeah,
what it
I
is.
think
Premier.
you're right.
Yep.
Very
So-
cool.
You still have, just for the historical value of it, the pits where the people would go down underneath the car, or did they disappear at the center?
They all got filled in. Yep.
It's a
Yep.
shame.
They all filled in.
I hope you can stay around for a few. We're just going to do a few business things, but I'd love to see
Yep.
your
Not a problem.
pictures. And again, I thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
I learned a lot. Before anybody leaves, I'll be remiss if I don't ask. If anybody would like to get on our email list, even if you're think you're on it, there's a little sheet over on that gray table there. Could you please put your name and the email address, because we're trying to start again. We had a few things that got lost with our databases. Yeah. So real quick, just a few things from our business meeting here. We have, for those that know us, we're working on what we call the cemetery project, which is Wenrick Cemetery out at St. Thomas Church. We had applied for a grant, which we didn't get, but that's okay. We're still working on that. But I'm happy to announce that the Boy Scout troop that we're working hand in hand with has done a whole lot of work. We went out in the woods and marked the trees with Jim Doyle from Nature's Way, and that we wanted to get taken down. The Boy Scouts and their families have done that, so we're moving forward. And since we don't have the funding from the grant, this goes back to that little card that I was talking about, the Community Foundation saying they're our 501c3. We may eventually work up a type of a fundraiser through them, because again, we as a commission here don't use any taxpayer dollars. We're forbidden to do that, and that's okay. We just have to get more creative. But we may set up some type of like a PayPal account that would go to the commission, and then they would hold it for us. And we want to use that money to buy a monument, which will honor all of the people that eventually we had it as an honor for the slaves from our area, because there was a lot of slaves in Lower Paxton. And then we decided that we knew our research, we found out that people were buried on top of people out at that cemetery. So this monument is going to try to be fairly inclusive of all those that have been forgotten, and to try to bring honor back to that area and back to those people. And then we want to work along with one of the colleges and do some further research with ground penetrating radar and that. So you'll be hearing more and more about that. But we're very excited that the woods look 80% better, just from the work that the Boy Scouts did. And we're trying to work with them as through Eagle Ward projects with them. So that's that. The only other thing that I want to ask, we're on for not this Saturday but next Saturday to work. So we're going to be, anybody that has donated stuff. I know that a lot of us up here personally have donated archives from the township. We're slowly moving and trying to get organized and moving those into acid-free boxes and that. So we're going to be meeting, do we decide 8 or 8:30? 8. A week from this Saturday. And so we're hoping to get that. So real quick, are there any other committee member comments? Are there? Turn on your microphone.
Since we do not have a presentation for June, two things, this is a dual thing. Our next scheduled regular business meeting would be next week. In lieu of that, I would like, I don't know if the motion needs to be made. Okay, make a motion that we forego the regular meeting next week and move it to the June meeting, which would be June 1st, and make it at 6 o'clock. And make that our business meeting.
Would somebody like to second that?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
And with that, you just reminded me of something. Dang, it's tough getting old. So we'll do the business meeting, and that's what I want to say. Our next presentation will be July, and our very own Donnie Goss, who will be doing a presentation called the, did you name it Civil War?
It's what we're going to call it is, it's called A Casualty at Gettysburg. It's the story of John Joseph Winrick.
And
That's all I'm going to say. You have to come to hear the rest.
That's right, and he was very important. The Wenrick name was very important to the Lingelstown area, and I look forward to that. So July will be our next presentation, and I hope that all of you can make it. And if you sign our email, we'll give you a reminder. Are there any other committee member comments? Are there any comments from the public? Yes.
On the cemeteries, are you familiar with the one in Hunt Club?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'll talk to you about it. I'd like to see it. I heard about it.
Denise has done a lot of research
And it's
in conjunction with them.
and it's gorgeous. They'll let you go on the property, and you just go right up along the hill by their clubhouse, and it sits up there. And
Harrisburg Hunters and Anglers. That one I know about.
oh,
That's the Beck family. Hunt Club, you go out Red Top Road.
oh yes,
Right?
yeah. That one is the Fackler Cemetery, and the Fackler Cemetery has Polly Eisenhower is buried there. And when I actually saw some of the stones, and it's in a horrible shape. We're actually trying to do some research to try to help it. The one stone that I saw, and it was very hard to read, I swear it said slave on it. And I'd be curious to.
Really accessible.
It's technically on private property
I
now.
heard about that. The guy wanted to build on it. No one knew it was a cemetery. So
Right.
I guess that's cool.
Right. And then so that was a person not from around here. He's from the Mideast, one of the other countries. And then I think that a dentist or somebody like that bought it. So we want to have access to it and try to do some preservation, because it's extremely important with the Eisenhower. I'll tell you what, if you go on to Find a Grave on the computer and put in Fackler Cemetery, you'll see pictures of all the stones. And it was actually, those pictures were taken when the cemetery was in better shape than what it is today.
I didn't think you could sell this.
The county sold it, actually.
It might be remiss.
It just gets, like he said, it's an orphaned lot, and it's they just took it off the register and sold it, and it's technically private land, so
And the other one's on the new side.
yeah.
I mowed that a couple of times because someone does it, but they didn't do it, so I went in there and weed whacked. And it seemed to go back a whole lot further before, and now it seems shorter.
Well-
And that's another one where I think,
Well, the-
someone's in there and isn't getting credit for being there.
Well, there's, I'll go back to Andy Mazik, who's in the audience, Jay Purdy, myself, along with a few others back in the early 2000s. That became our project that when we were the Lower Paxton Historical Society, and we went in and cleaned that up. We got the township to take ownership of it from the townhouse Four Seasons that was right there. Andy goes out, especially around Memorial Day, and cleans it up. I go out once in a while and clean it up. The fence that was put around was an Eagle project. And the interesting thing is, if you look at the Daughters of the American Revolution that's there, there's not enough room for that little 15, 20, whatever it is by 20 spot. So we honestly believe that it not only went back, because see, that was all Freisinger Farm at one time. It not only went back north of that, it went to the east of that towards the pond where those woods are. And we feel that there's a lot of people buried in there from that time period.
So, because I remember at least going back further, I know there was stuff there. I was trying to be careful.
Yeah, it's us as a historical body is, you can't have everything perfect. So we're happy with what we were able to preserve, and some of those stones in there are so rare because if it was made out of another product, another type of stone, they would have eroded by now. And so we're really hoping that stays safe and protected. So that's why we're glad the township took ownership of it.
Some of those, the graveyard itself dates back to about the 1750s, I think. And it ran until about the 1850s, was the last person that went in there. And from what we've heard from people, at one point they took out the stones so that they could farm the property, farm that. But no, it's in our future hopes
Yeah.
to do something with that.
Because again, we'd like to use ground penetrating radar to go to the from the cemetery plot that you've seen there and go around it and go. But again, you're restricted because we don't own that property over there. We only own, and when I mean we, I'm talking the township only owns the marked off area and a little bit of land around that. But and there's no building going to happen to the east of that, but I would love to, it would have to be cleared out somehow so we can get that, the machinery in there that would be required to see. And again, back then, and Andy and Jay, from our research, they were only buried probably about 3 feet deep, back then, because they basically wanted to get the bodies buried before Native Americans, before they would be raided. Because a lot of in some cases, the cemetery areas were raided, and they would take treasure from it, and that again isn't all Native Americans because death was very respected, but again, that's a whole other part of history right there that happened. So they buried them quick, and it was about 3 feet down. And again, with Denise. We've been trying to locate where the church was actually located because the Newside Church itself came as a breakaway from the Paxton Church. And so we would love to know where that is. Rick and I were just out a week or two ago looking at a property with one of the doors, but we decided that wasn't old enough to have been there. So there's a whole lot of history right in that area. And actually that history there's a lot of really interesting history from that point going all the way up towards Rutherford area. A lot of very famous, well-known people, very wealthy people. And that cemetery is our Revolutionary War soldiers, and they need to be completely honored. So that's definitely one of our treasures.
It's for French and Indian War, Revolutionary War, and even War of 1812 veterans in there too.
Yep. Anything else?
I'll just mention that on August 3rd, we're going to have the presentation by the Harrisburg Hunters and Anglers.
Thank you. That's
And they'll be featuring their Revolutionary Wars cemetery that's on their plot. So he'll be showing some photos and pictures of that. And I think there'll be more presentations of that in the future, but he's going to talk about that as well as a history of Harrisburg Hunters and Anglers. And that's on August 3rd.
okay.
Also, a quick follow-up, and this won't take but a minute. I finished the research for those of you, I think some of you were here for the Shoup's Church and Cemetery presentation. And they had mentioned, Reverend Person mentioned it, 14th and a half Street and Shoup Street. I did a lot of research. I mean, I did a complete grid on that. And came to the conclusion, because of the research, that 14th and a half Street was only a paper-driven street. It was never a formally, as far as I know to date, it was never formally a street name. It was on paper only. And I have evidence of the paper because my husband has a framed picture of that area of Harrisburg in 1869 in our basement. And that's how we were able to locate it, and that's how I gridded things out. But at this point, with everything I've researched, I never saw any mention of 14 and a half Street. I did find a couple, only one or two Lutheran streets that are Lutheran churches that might be in relation to what he said. The other thing I also want to report is I'm in the process of making copies of certain things that we found from Bill Bailey. And I just got a text from him 2 days ago. He found some more stuff.
Nice.
So as soon as I am done with that, I will return to him what we borrowed, and we will make an exchange, and Denise and I will have another treasure day of looking through documents to see if we can find any more information on what was part of the old cemetery that is gone because of 83, any homes around there. We're still looking. So that's where we are at this point with what we were given through that presentation.
Excellent. All right, with that said, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.